Hey everybody, it's David Sirota. So there's been a lot of headlines about Robert Mueller's indictment and questions about foreign influence in American politics. A lot of people are treating the indictment and the allegations of Russian interference in the election as something extremely new. That is, that foreign government influence in the United States is something completely new, something completely novel and the like. But the question really is whether the indictments about Russia are going to prompt a wider look and wider investigation into all sorts of ways that foreign governments exert influence in the United States. Because here's the thing, this is not a new thing. I mean, the allegations against the specific allegations about Russia are new, but the influence of foreign governments in American politics is not new. It's big, bipartisan business, it's out in the open, and it's right in everyone's faces. And it has been for a very long time. And the question is, will the investigation into the specific Russia allegations also prompt us to step back and say, how much influence do foreign governments, much less multinational corporations, have in the U.S. political process, and how has that influence been happening over many years? I want to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about, because there are four really good examples of what I'm talking about to give you a sense of the fact that the Russia investigation really is touching on a much bigger phenomenon. So here's one example. MapLight, the campaign finance watchdog group, and International Business Times recently reported about lobbyists who represent foreign governments and how they give lots of money to American politicians. The joint investigation found that those lobbyists gave more than $4.5 million to federal lawmakers and candidates. They also packaged together another $5.9 million worth of donations. That's called bundling. So these are lobbyists who are literally registered foreign agents, registered to represent foreign governments and foreign interests, who are funneling large amounts of campaign contributions into the American political process. And they're allowed to do it because the lobbyists are American citizens. Even though they're representing foreign governments, they're allowed to essentially be funneling money into political campaigns and to candidates while they're representing foreign interests. So that's one example of potential foreign influence over American politics. How about think tanks? There was a 2014 New York Times report, an investigation that found, quote, more than a dozen prominent Washington research groups have received tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments in recent years while pushing the United States government officials to adopt policies that often reflect those donors' priorities. The whole think tank world and how think tanks produce policies that are designed to influence American politics, you've got a large amount of foreign money coming into those think tanks that are influencing and shaping American politics. Here's another one. I mean, you look at the Saudi Arabia is one of the big influencers in Washington. Here's a Washington Post report. The Saudi government and its affiliates, quote, have spent millions of dollars on U.S. law, lobby, and public relations firms to raise the country's visibility in the United States. The story goes on to say, quote, some of Washington's premier law and lobby firms, including the Podesta Group, BGR, DLA Piper, and Pillsbury Winthrop, have been tasked with the job, according to a review of Justice Department filings. That's the Washington Post. And then most recently, there was a story in The Intercept, which found that a $10 billion chemical company controlled by the Chinese government now has an avenue to influence American elections. The story notes that, quote, this company, quote, joined the American Chemistry Council, a lobby organization for chemical manufacturers that is unusually aggressive in intervening in U.S. politics. The point here is not to downplay the Russia investigation. The Russia investigation touches on a potential phenomenon that is much bigger than the specific Russia situation. The investigation is looking at the ways in the allegations that Russian foreign interests were involved in trying to influence the American election. But the influencing of American elections by foreign interests and foreign governments is big business. It's out in the open. And so watch for what isn't being talked about. What I've just laid out for you isn't really being talked about in the middle of this Russia investigation. And the silence on it would suggest that this is somehow, that the Russia situation and foreign influence in general is somehow a new phenomenon, when it's absolutely not a new phenomenon. The reason it may not be being talked about in Washington, that larger phenomenon, is because it is a big bipartisan business. This is something that's been going on for a long time with lobbyists and former members of Congress and two political candidates of both political parties. And the fact that this hasn't been really discussed, or that the Russia investigation hasn't been contextualized within this entire context of foreign influence in Washington, D.C., that omission suggests that the political powers that be don't really want to talk about foreign influence over U.S. Politics, that they want to try to create a scandal over one potential set of allegations, but they don't want to necessarily look at the entire issue, at the entire systemic, the systemic way that this operates. And it's just worth remembering that you can pull out this one example, the Russia example, and say, hey, this is a huge problem. But if you're being honest about it, it should be contextualized within the system through which, a very multi-layered system through which foreign interests, foreign governments, and multinational corporations have been influencing American politics and Washington policy for a very long time.